Sid was only 7 years old, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen much more of life than a child should. She lived with her big sister in a small rented apartment on the edge of town. Their parents had passed away when Sid was very young, and since then her sister had taken on the role of both mother and father. She was only in her early 20s, still trying to figure out her own life, but she worked day and night so that Sid never went to bed hungry. Every morning, Sid's sister woke up before sunrise to prepare a little breakfast, usually just tea and bread, and then hurried off to her first job. In the afternoon, she would run to another workplace, and in the evening she would still find the strength to sit with Sid, ask about her school, and tuck her into bed with a smile. Sid admired her sister more than anyone in the world. To her, her sister was like a superhero who could do everything: cook, clean, work, and even comfort her when she had nightmares. But even at her young age, Sid noticed the tiredness in her sister's eyes. She noticed how sometimes her sister's hands shook when she counted the little money they had left, or how her smile would fade when she thought Sid had fallen asleep. Sid understood more than her sister realized. She knew life was not easy, and she wished she could help in some way. Their apartment was very small. There were only 2 rooms. One served as the bedroom for both of them, and the other as a living space where they cooked and studied. The walls were old, the paint was peeling, and the floor made sounds when they walked. But Sid didn't care about that. To her it was home because her sister was there. Every corner of that little apartment held memories. Memories of laughter, of shared meals, of whispered stories before bed. Sid loved to curl up next to her sister at night, listening to her heartbeat, feeling safe even when the outside world felt so big and frightening. At school, Sid was a bright child. Teachers liked her because she was always polite and hardworking. She didn't always have the newest clothes or the fanciest school supplies, but she had determination. Sometimes other children would ask why she never talked much about her parents, and Sid would stay quiet. She didn't want to talk about the sadness. Instead, she wanted to focus on the happiness she found in her sister's smile. One evening, Sid came home from school and saw her sister sitting at the small table in their living space. Papers and bills were spread out in front of her. A little candle flickered, throwing shadows on her face. She looked so tired. Sid stood quietly at the door, not wanting to disturb her. But when she saw her sister rub her eyes and press her forehead as if she had a headache, Sid's little heart ached. She walked over, placed her small hand on her sister's arm, and said softly, "Don't worry. I'll study hard and grow up fast. Then I'll help you." Her sister looked at her and smiled, even though tears were forming in her eyes. She hugged Sid tightly and said, "You already help me more than you know." Those words stayed with Sid. She thought about them again and again. She wondered how she could help even more, not just by being a good girl or studying hard, but by giving her sister some happiness. Sid began to notice little things. She noticed how her sister never bought new clothes for herself, always choosing to buy Sid's school uniform instead. She noticed how her sister never went out with friends, never had time to relax or laugh like other young women her age. Sid realized that her sister was giving up her own youth for her sake. That thought made Sid determined to do something. She didn't know what yet, but in her heart she promised herself that she would find a way to bring joy into her sister's life. One Saturday morning, Sid and her sister went to the market. The market was busy and noisy, filled with people bargaining, sellers shouting about fresh vegetables, and children running around. Sid loved going there because she could see so many colors and hear so many voices, but she also saw how carefully her sister counted every coin before buying something. They could never buy too much, only what was needed. As they walked back with their small bag of groceries, Sid saw her sister struggling with the weight. Without thinking, Sid quickly tried to carry the bag herself, but it was too heavy for her little hands and she almost dropped it. At that very moment, a man walking nearby stepped forward and caught the bag before it fell. He smiled kindly at Sid and said, "Careful, little one. That's too heavy for you." He then helped her sister carry the groceries. Sid looked at him curiously. He was not dressed like someone rich, but he looked neat and respectful. He spoke to her sister politely, not like some of the people who sometimes treated them with pity or ignored them completely. Sid noticed how her sister's face turned a little red as she thanked him. The man just smiled and said it was no trouble. He walked with them for a while, carrying the bag until they reached near their home. Then he waved goodbye and left. That night, Sid lay in bed thinking about the kind man. Something about the way he looked at her sister stayed in her mind. It wasn't just kindness, it was respect. Sid whispered to herself, maybe he could be someone who makes my sister smile. The idea was small, but it grew quickly in her little heart. She imagined her sister laughing more, not just smiling to hide her worries. She imagined someone helping her carry the heavy loads, someone listening to her stories, someone caring for her as much as she cared for Sid. And in her childish innocence, Sid thought maybe she could help her sister find that. She didn't know how, but she believed that her sister deserved more than just struggle. As days passed, Sid kept watching. She looked for chances to see that man again, to maybe connect him with her sister. She didn't tell her sister about these thoughts because she feared her sister would laugh or scold her gently for being too young to think about such things. But Sid knew what she saw. She knew that her sister's happiness mattered more than anything. That night, as her sister tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead, Sid held her sister's hand tightly and whispered, "I love you more than anything." Her sister smiled softly and replied, "And I love you more than everything too." But as her sister turned off the light, Sid stayed awake for a long time thinking about her secret plan. For Sid, this was the beginning of something. She didn't have money, she didn't have power, but she had her heart and her voice. And sometimes a little girl's honest words could do what nothing else could. Sid didn't know yet how much those words would change both of their lives, but she was ready to try. Sid woke up early the next morning with an unusual energy in her little body. The memory of the kind man who had helped them with groceries stayed in her mind like a bright picture. She wanted to see him again, not for herself, but because she felt something when he looked at her sister. It wasn't pity and it wasn't just politeness. It was respect. Sid believed deep in her heart that her sister deserved someone who would truly see her value. The day started the same way as usual. Her sister prepared breakfast quickly before rushing off to her morning job. She gave Sid her lunchbox, kissed her forehead, and reminded her to listen to her teacher. Sid nodded as always, but this time her thoughts were somewhere else. At school, while other children played in the yard, Sid sat quietly imagining how she could bring her sister and that man together again. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he lived, but she remembered his face and his gentle voice. After school, Sid returned home and found her sister already busy in the kitchen, making a simple meal of rice and lentils. Sid watched her carefully, noticing the way she moved quickly, trying to finish everything before leaving for her second job. Sid wanted to say something about the man, but she held it back. She knew her sister might brush it off or say she didn't have time for such things. So Sid decided to keep her little plan in her heart for now. A week passed before Sid saw the man again. She was walking home from school when she spotted him at the same grocery store, buying some fruits. Her heart jumped with excitement. She ran to him and smiled brightly. "Hello," she said. The man turned, surprised but pleased, and bent down to her level. "Oh, it's you again. How are you, little one?" Sid nodded happily and said she was fine. Then she quickly added, "Do you remember my sister? The one you helped with groceries?" The man smiled. "Yes, I remember. She is very hard-working." Sid felt proud hearing that. She nodded and replied, "She works all the time. She never rests. I wish someone could help her." She spoke with the pure honesty of a child, not realizing how deeply her words touched the man. He looked at Sid for a moment, then gently asked, "And what about you? Doesn't she take care of you well?" Sid's eyes shone as she answered, "She takes care of me always. But who takes care of her?" The man had no answer. He looked at the little girl with admiration, realizing how much love and wisdom was hidden in her young heart. He bought an extra bag of apples and handed them to Sid. "Give these to your sister," he said with a smile. "Tell her she is doing a wonderful job." Sid grinned and promised she would. That evening, Sid rushed home with the bag of apples. Her sister looked surprised. "Where did you get these?" she asked. Sid explained that the kind man from before had given them. Her sister looked thoughtful, almost worried. "You shouldn't take things from strangers, Sid," she said gently. But Sid insisted, "He's not a stranger. He's nice. He said you're hard-working and you're wonderful." Her sister blushed a little, though she tried to hide it. Sid noticed, and inside her heart she felt even more certain that this man could bring some happiness into their lives. Days turned into weeks, and Sid found herself noticing the man more often. Sometimes he was at the market, sometimes passing by their street. Each time he greeted Sid warmly, and once or twice he even spoke briefly with her sister. Sid's sister remained polite but distant. She was not used to accepting kindness from others. She had built a wall around her heart, focusing only on her responsibility to raise Sid. But Sid wasn't going to give up. She was small, but her love for her sister was big enough to push her forward. One afternoon, as they walked home from the store again, Sid boldly said to the man, "You should meet my sister properly. She doesn't talk much, but she is very nice. She is perfect for you." The man was caught off guard, and her sister gasped in shock. "Sid!" she scolded, her face turning red. Sid looked up innocently and said, "What?" "It's true. Please take care of us both." For a long moment there was silence. Her sister didn't know where to look. The man finally laughed softly, not at Sid, but out of genuine surprise and warmth. "You are very honest, little one," he said. "Your sister must be proud of you." Sid's sister quickly ended the conversation and hurried Sid home, but that moment lingered in both of their hearts. That night, Sid's sister sat quietly after dinner. She stared at the small table, lost in thought. Sid climbed into her lap and hugged her tightly. "Don't be angry," Sid whispered. "I just want you to be happy." Her sister kissed her hair and sighed. "Sid, life is not as simple as you think. People don't just appear and fix everything." But Sid looked up with her clear, innocent eyes and said, "Sometimes they do." In the following weeks, the man continued to appear. Each time he showed the same kindness, not only to Sid but also to her sister. He carried their groceries again when he saw them struggling. He asked how Sid was doing in school. He never crossed any line, never made them feel uncomfortable. Slowly, the wall around Sid's sister's heart began to soften. One rainy afternoon, when Sid and her sister were caught without an umbrella, the man appeared once again, holding one over their heads. He walked them home, getting wet himself while making sure they stayed dry. Sid's sister looked at him with gratitude, though she didn't say much. But Sid noticed something in her sister's eyes that she hadn't seen for a long time, a spark of relief, a tiny bit of trust. Sid couldn't stop smiling as she watched them walk together under the umbrella. To her, it felt like her wish was starting to come true. She didn't fully understand the world of adults, but she knew one thing. Her sister deserved love, care, and laughter. And if it took her bold words to make that happen, Sid was ready to keep saying them. That night, after they dried off and warmed their hands by a small heater, Sid's sister whispered to herself, "Maybe this world still has some kindness left." Sid, pretending to sleep, heard those words and smiled under her blanket. She knew her little plan was working, slowly but surely. Sid woke up one morning with a big smile on her face. She couldn't stop thinking about the rainy day when the man had walked them home under his umbrella. To Sid, that moment had felt like something out of a storybook, something she wanted her sister to experience again and again. Her little heart told her that the man was different from others. They had met many people before, but very few had shown genuine respect and care. Sid believed this was no accident. She thought it was a sign. Her sister, however, acted as though nothing had changed. She went on with her routine, working, cooking, and caring for Sid. She didn't mention the man, and when Sid tried to bring him up, her sister quickly changed the subject. But Sid noticed small things. She noticed how her sister paused for a second when she passed the market, where they had met him before. She noticed how her sister's cheeks grew pink whenever Sid said his name. Even though her sister was trying to hide her feelings, Sid could see them. Children had a way of noticing what adults tried so hard to cover. One Saturday morning, Sid was playing outside their building when she suddenly saw the man again. He was carrying 2 bags of vegetables. Sid ran up to him excited.
"Hello,"
she said, waving her small hands. The man smiled warmly. "Hello, Sid, how are you today?" Sid nodded and said, "I'm good. My sister is at home. Do you want to say hello?" Without waiting for his answer, she grabbed his hand and pulled him toward their apartment. Her sister was surprised when Sid entered with the man. She quickly stood up, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "Oh, hello," she said politely. The man greeted her with the same respect as always. "I was just passing by and met Sid," he explained. Sid's sister nodded, a little embarrassed, but thanked him again for his kindness. Sid, meanwhile, was bursting with excitement. She pulled out 2 chairs and insisted they sit together. "Talk," she demanded with innocent boldness. Both adults laughed softly at her honesty. The man stayed for a short while, and they spoke about small things, how the market was crowded, how Sid was doing well in school, and how life in the neighborhood was. For Sid, it was the happiest moment, watching her sister and the man share a conversation. She noticed the way her sister's voice softened, and how her eyes lit up when she smiled. Sid felt proud, as if she had done something very important. After he left, her sister turned to Sid and shook her head. "You are too much, Sid," she said, though her lips curved into a smile. Sid hugged her sister's waist and whispered, "I just want you to be happy." Her sister kissed her forehead but said nothing more. Still, Sid could tell she wasn't angry. In the days that followed, the man began to appear more often. Sometimes he brought fruit, sometimes he simply stopped to ask if they needed help carrying things. Sid's sister still hesitated, keeping a polite distance, but she was slowly beginning to trust him. And Sid? She continued her role as a little matchmaker, always finding ways to bring them together. One evening, Sid and her sister were walking back from the store when they met the man again. He offered to carry their bag, and as they walked, he asked Sid's sister about her work. She explained shyly that she worked 2 jobs to take care of her younger sister. The man listened carefully and said with admiration, "That is not easy, but you are very strong." Sid's sister blushed and looked away, but Sid quickly jumped in, saying, "Yes, she is the strongest, but she needs someone strong for her too." Both adults were taken aback by her directness. Sid's sister quickly tried to hush her, but the man only smiled kindly and said, "Sid, you are very brave to speak your heart." That night, Sid's sister scolded her gently. "You can't say things like that, Sid. Adults have their own ways." But Sid looked at her sister with wide eyes and replied, "Then maybe adults should listen to children sometimes." "Because I can see what you don't." Her sister had no reply to that. She just hugged Sid tightly, tears forming in her eyes. Deep down, she knew Sid was not wrong. As time went on, the man's presence became a quiet comfort in their lives. He never forced his way in. He came with respect, with patience, and always with kindness. Sid adored him, and her sister began to appreciate his sincerity. There were moments when they all laughed together, moments when the small apartment felt less heavy and more like a real home filled with warmth. One particular afternoon stood out. Sid had a small school event where parents and guardians were invited. Her sister had taken time off work to attend, even though it meant losing some wages. She sat proudly in the front row as Sid recited a poem on stage. But what surprised them both was seeing the man in the audience, too. He had come quietly, not to intrude, but simply to support Sid. After the event, he told her sister, "She is very talented. You must be proud." Sid's sister was speechless, moved by his gesture. Sid, however, smiled brightly and said, "See? He cares about us both." That evening, as they walked home together, Sid's sister finally admitted softly, "He is kind." Sid squeezed her hand and whispered, "Yes, and he is perfect for you." Her sister didn't reply, but Sid noticed she didn't deny it either. Later that night, Sid lay in bed thinking about everything. She felt proud that her sister was slowly opening her heart. She thought about the future, about how nice it would be to have someone else in their little family. Someone who could help her sister carry the weight of life. Someone who could make her laugh again. Sid whispered into the dark, "Please let this work out. Please let my sister be happy." What Sid didn't realize was how powerful her innocent honesty had already been. Her simple words had planted seeds of thought in both her sister's and the man's hearts. Words that carried no hidden meaning, no games, only truth. And sometimes, truth spoken by a child has the strength to move mountains. The story of Sid's little plan was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, their small apartment glowed with hope. And Sid, the little girl with the brave heart, felt certain that she had set something beautiful in motion. Something that could change their lives forever. Sid's little heart felt lighter each day. She could see changes in her sister, small but clear, like sunlight slowly entering a dark room. Her sister still worked hard, still worried about bills, but now there were moments when she laughed, and that laughter made Sid feel like everything was going to be all right. The man had become a quiet part of their lives. He never pushed too hard, but he was always there at the right time, carrying their groceries, asking if Sid had finished her homework, or simply greeting them with a kind smile. One Sunday afternoon, he came by with a small basket of oranges. He knocked gently on their door, and Sid was the first to run and open it. "You came!" she shouted happily, pulling him inside. Her sister looked surprised, but she welcomed him politely. The man placed the basket on the table and said, "I thought you might like some fresh fruit." Sid clapped her hands and said, "We love it." "Thank you." As they sat together, Sid noticed how carefully he spoke to her sister. He asked her about her work, not in a nosy way, but with genuine interest. Her sister, though shy, slowly opened up, sharing little pieces of her daily struggles. She admitted how hard it was to balance two jobs, how she sometimes felt guilty for not giving Sid everything she wished for. The man listened quietly, his face showing respect and admiration. Then he said, "You are doing more than most people could. Sid is lucky to have you." Sid watched her sister's face soften. She wasn't used to hearing such words. Most people only told her to work harder or assumed she was struggling. But here was someone who saw her strength. Sid could see the effect it had on her sister, and she felt proud of her little plan. Over the next weeks, his visits became more frequent. Sometimes he helped Sid with her school assignments, making her laugh with funny examples. Other times he carried heavy bags up the stairs for her sister, insisting it was no trouble. Each act, small as it seemed, made their lives a little brighter. One evening it rained heavily again. Sid and her sister were stuck at the bus stop without an umbrella. Just when Sid started to feel the cold drops on her head, a familiar voice called out, "Over here." It was him, holding an umbrella, waving at them. He hurried over and covered them both, walking them home in the downpour. This time her sister didn't resist his kindness. She walked beside him, letting him share the burden of the storm. When they reached the apartment, Sid noticed her sister's cheeks glowing, not from the rain, but from something deeper. That night, as they dried their clothes, Sid whispered, "See, he cares about you." Her sister smiled faintly and kissed Sid's forehead. She didn't argue this time. Slowly, trust grew between them. Her sister, who once guarded her heart like a locked door, began to let it open little by little. She even allowed herself to laugh more often when the man was around. Sid felt like a little magician, pulling invisible strings to connect them, but in truth, it was her innocent honesty that had made them see each other in a new light. One afternoon, Sid's teacher invited her sister to a parent-teacher meeting. Sid was nervous, but she did well in school, so she wasn't worried. What surprised her was that the man also came. He had found out from Sid and decided to attend too, sitting quietly at the back of the classroom. When the teacher praised Sid's performance, the man's eyes shone with pride as if she were his own family. Afterward, he told her sister, "You've raised her wonderfully. You should be proud." Her sister was touched. She held Sid's hand tightly and whispered, "Yes, I am proud." Sid could see that something had changed. The man was no longer just a kind stranger who helped occasionally. He had become part of their small circle, someone who cared not only for Sid but also for her sister. The apartment felt warmer whenever he visited. Sid would sit between them, holding both their hands, giggling as if she had created her own little world. One evening, as they shared tea together, Sid did what she always did. She spoke her heart without fear. "You should smile more, sister," she said. "You're prettier when you smile. And you should stay with us," she added, looking at the man. Both adults froze for a moment. Her sister tried to hush her, but the man only chuckled softly and replied, "Sid, you're very brave. You say what others only think." Her sister blushed deeply, but Sid saw that she didn't scold her the way she once would have. Instead, she stayed quiet, her eyes thoughtful. Sid felt her plan was working, not because she forced it, but because she reminded them both of what they truly needed. The man continued to show up in their lives, not with grand gestures, but with simple kindness. He fixed the loose hinge on their door, helped carry water when the supply was low, and encouraged Sid's sister to take short breaks from work. "You can't pour from an empty cup," he told her once. She didn't fully understand the phrase, but she understood the meaning. She needed to take care of herself too. That night, Sid heard her sister whisper a prayer of thanks before bed. It was the first time Sid had ever heard her pray out loud since their parents passed away. Sid's heart swelled with joy. She snuggled closer and whispered, "I told you, sister. Someone can take care of us both." For the first time in years, her sister didn't deny it. She kissed Sid's forehead and replied softly, "Maybe you're right." Those simple words felt like music to Sid's ears. From that moment, their days felt lighter. Her sister no longer carried every burden alone. She still worked hard, but she also allowed herself to accept help, to share her worries and to smile freely. Sid, the little girl with a brave heart, watched all this with shining eyes, knowing deep inside that her wish was slowly coming true. The bond between the three of them grew stronger, built not on grand promises but on small, consistent acts of kindness. And Sid, sitting between her sister and the man, felt like she had created something precious, a family that was no longer broken, but slowly being made whole again. Sid woke up one morning to the sound of her sister humming softly in the kitchen. It was a simple tune, one their mother used to sing long ago. Sid rubbed her eyes, stretched her little arms, and smiled. It had been a long time since she heard her sister hum like that. For years, her sister's mornings were filled with rushing, sighing, and quiet worries. But now there was a softness in the air, as if the heaviness of life was slowly lifting. Sid knew the reason. The man who had entered their lives so quietly had become like a steady light. He never promised big things, but his presence changed everything. Her sister no longer carried every bag alone, no longer faced every problem in silence. She had someone to share her burdens with, and Sid had someone who made her laugh when she needed it most. One afternoon, Sid returned home from school to find her sister sitting with the man at the small wooden table in their living space. They were looking at papers together. Sid's first thought was worry. Were they bills again? But then she saw her sister's face, not tense or sad, but hopeful. The man was pointing at something on the paper and saying, "This training course can open new doors for you. You've worked so hard and you deserve a chance to grow." Her sister nodded shyly. She had always dreamed of continuing her studies, but she had stopped long ago because life became too heavy. Now, with encouragement, she was considering it again. Sid's heart filled with pride. She rushed forward and hugged them both. "Yes, sister. You should do it. You're the smartest." "I'll help too." Her sister laughed, pulling her close. "And what help will you give me, little one?" Sid answered proudly. "I'll do all my homework without complaining, so you can study too." Everyone laughed, but Sid meant every word. Weeks later, her sister enrolled in the training course. It wasn't easy. She had to balance work, classes, and home, but this time she wasn't alone. The man often came by to help. He explained difficult lessons, encouraged her when she felt tired, and reminded her that she was capable of much more than she believed. Sid watched all this with shining eyes, as if her dream was unfolding in front of her. Their home began to change, not in size or wealth, but in spirit. There was laughter at the dinner table, soft conversations in the evenings, and sometimes even playful teasing. Sid often sat between her sister and the man, holding both their hands tightly like she was making sure the bond stayed strong. She didn't fully understand what adults called love, but she understood care, respect, and kindness. And she saw those things growing around her every day. Months passed, and her sister completed the training course successfully. She applied for a better job, and with her skills, she was hired. When she received her first paycheck from the new job, she cried tears of joy. She hugged Sid tightly and whispered, "We did it." But Sid shook her head and pointed at the man. "No, we did it." Her sister looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't look away. She let herself hold his gaze, and in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. Life gradually improved. They were able to buy better food, pay bills on time, and even save a little. Their small apartment no longer felt like a place of survival, but a place of hope. Sid noticed her sister smiling more often, not just for Sid's sake, but for herself. And each time she smiled, the man looked at her as if the world had given him a gift. One evening, as they all sat together, Sid decided to speak the words that had lived in her heart since the beginning. "You remember what I said the first time?" she asked boldly. Her sister and the man looked at her curious. Sid straightened her back and said clearly, "I told you my big sister is perfect for you. Please take care of us both." "And you did." Her sister gasped softly, embarrassed, but her eyes filled with tears. The man smiled warmly and replied, "Sid, you are wiser than your years. You saw what we didn't." He reached out and gently placed his hand over her sister's. For a moment, no one spoke. The room was filled with quiet understanding. From that day, things became more natural. The man was no longer just a visitor. He was part of their lives. He joined them for meals, helped with chores, and spent evenings telling Sid stories. Her sister, though shy at first, began to let herself lean on him. She allowed him to share not just their work, but their joys too. For Sid, this was the happiest ending she could have imagined. She saw her sister free from loneliness, She saw their home filled with laughter, and she felt safe knowing someone else loved them both. Sometimes at night, Sid whispered to herself, "Mission complete," before drifting off to sleep with a smile. But the truth was, her mission had done more than just change their little family. It had taught her sister something precious, that it was okay to accept love, that strength didn't mean carrying everything alone, and that kindness could rebuild what life had broken. And it had taught the man that sometimes the bravest words come from a child's heart. Years later, when people asked how this family came together, the man would always laugh and point at Sid. "It was her," he would say. "This little girl told me the truth without fear. She saw what we could not see." Her sister would smile, holding Sid close, and add, "She gave me back my life." Sid, still small but full of pride, would grin and say, "I just wanted my sister to be happy." And in that simple answer lay the whole truth. Because sometimes love enters a home not through big plans or perfect timing, but through the brave honesty of a child who dares to speak her heart. Their story became one of hope, of resilience, and of the power of family. It showed that even in the hardest times, love can grow when kindness and courage lead the way. And for Sid, the little girl who wanted nothing but happiness for her sister, it was proof that dreams, spoken with honesty, can come true.